Happy Letha! Happy solstice, witches! Risa and I are so excited to finally be able to share with you our first ever Missing Witches live event, which we did in May. We're super grateful to the AJC and to Jonathan in particular for inviting us to their conclave and entrusting us with the beautiful space of Westmount Park United Church. The conclave was kind enough to set up a stationary mic for this recording, but we fooled them by moving all around the space, so you may find the sound a little inconsistent, but guess what? Life is a little inconsistent. Here's part 1, and part 2 is also online now. Happy solstice, witches.
You aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. 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 You must be a witch.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. Normally, as part of this conference, I've been giving long intros and bios for everyone, but the Missing Witches are going to do that instead. For people who aren't part of our community, you might be confused why a man in a collar in a church is welcoming witches to this pulpit. Well, yes. Well, we're an esoteric and mystic church. We have a lot of roots in what they call the occult revival of the late 1800s. And we sort of venerate an active spirituality. We have a lot of members and even clergy who also have connections with both magic mysticism and witchcraft. The Missing Witches podcast first episode was on Pixie Coleman Smith, a figure that was involved with a lot of the esoteric and occult orders of the late 1800s, early 20th century. She helped design. She designed and made one of the most important tarots ever. She's a figure we venerate. So to make a long story short, there's actually a lot of connections between our community and that of modern magicians, modern witchcraft, modern mystics, and you may miss that by looking at some dudes in collars. So I'm really happy that the witches are here today. We're kind of bringing together some streams that are actually cousins. Maybe it's second or third cousins, but we are related. So take it away.
This is a podcast. Thanks for coming. The theme of this conference that we were invited to participate in is the divine feminine. And we sort of started the Missing Witches podcast as a research project. We wanted to go looking for our heritage. We wanted to go looking for witches, real women. Who practiced and what did they practice? It was looking for a family tree in a way. And also we sort of stumbled into a kind of improvised witchcraft and spirituality from a place of loss. We lost a friend and we didn't know how to mourn her. We didn't really have the tools for that. And for a lot of reasons, for myself anyway, the church that I grew up in bums me out. There's a lot there that I don't feel at home in anymore. And so for us to be in nature and making up songs and feeling empowered singing together was sort of the place that our podcast came from many years ago.
So we started the Missing Witches podcast with This is a feminist history storytelling podcast where we try to fill in the gaps of our mental maps of what a witch is, and where are they, and what have they been doing. So when we were invited to this AJC conclave, we wanted to approach it the same way. What is the divine feminine? Where is it? And what has it been doing? And when we started looking into this, we found, by and large, the number one answer, how to access, how to engage the divine feminine, is through our dance. Through our human bodies, be they male bodies or female bodies or human bodies, animal bodies, dog bodies. We saw lots of wonderful dogs today, so I'm a little bit... So that's what we're doing here. We're looking at dance. We're looking at divinity. We're looking at femininity. We're looking at our bodies. And we're seeing how all of these things connect under the umbrella of witchcraft.
Yeah. My name is Risa, by
And
the way.
I'm Amy.
Amy.
These are our panelists. I mean, the ideas of divinity, femininity, we're going to unpack those. So we brought our beautiful panelists, Jackie and Phoenix. When we do our podcast, it's usually in two parts. One is like historical storytelling, and the other half is interviews. So that's basically how we're going to do this. Risa's going to tell us some stories. We're going to get you guys to dance. Yes, I see some hands clapping and some fists raising. So, welcome. The Divine Feminine invites you to dance.
Yeah. We have an episode that tells the history of a painter and witch named Monica Cho. And the story we love about her that we always come back to was that she was an activist witch, and she, on an Easter Sunday, came with a congregation of women activists into a church, and they came in singing that Burning Times chant that we sang on the way in. And
you're curious about what that
on
was.
the altar, they debated with the priest, and she told the history. She interrupted a public mass to tell the history of the women's genocide, of the witch burning times. And so in her honor, we sing that song, and we wanted to bring it into this Hall of Stone with you guys today.
Ultimately, the priest that was the priest at the church that Monica Cho and her group invaded, for lack of a better word, ultimately, he invited her and their group to finish the song and to speak their truth. So again, we want to thank Jonathan for being that priest who invites witches to express themselves on a pulpit. We're super grateful to be here. My relationship with church is a little different than Risa's. I grew up in the church, and I have very fond memories. But again, I grew up in the United Church, which here we are. It's a progressive church, marriages of all kinds you saw outside. It's about love and openness, and we hope to bring that out of you, out of your souls, out of your bodies today.
I'll close this sort of chatty part with a quote from Monica's show, and she tells the story of coming into the church and then leaving and feeling like they were sort of being expelled at the end and sort of feeling a little bit tired and a little bit drained, the way we sometimes are when we've been activists and we wonder if that has any purpose, if we've changed anything. She said, "We, however, felt immensely empowered and like we had broken the sound or mind barrier of some sort. Something had happened on cosmic proportions. When we returned to the conference, women were drumming ecstatically for hours, and we were dancing."
Isis started Diana, Hecate Demeter, Kali, Inana. Isis started Diana, Hecate Demeter, Kali, Maya.
Today for this, our first live episode of the Missing Witches podcast, in this holy Hall of Stone, or Hall of Holy Stone, in the generous and welcoming heart of the Apostolic Johannite Church's annual conclave, I want to talk about dance. The theme is the divine feminine, and neither of those words rest exactly easy with me, which probably makes it a great theme to dig into over a couple of days with some very smart and thoughtful people. The closest I've come to something that jives with my own personal definition of the divine is this, from philosopher Martin Buber. When two people relate to each other authentically and humanly, God is the electricity that surges between them. Except my instinct is that the goddess goes much further. She is that quicksilver surge, not just between humans, but between animals.
crows with their generational memories, the seas gasping with tides, the living trees. And if we are trying to relate authentically and humanly to create that holy electricity, and if we are trying to call and connect with ourselves and others to be that spark of the divine, and if we want to access a different polarity of the divine than that which has been preached by the major religions, a desire that by its very nature disrupts patriarchy, maybe we need to approach her not sitting still and straight. Maybe we need to dance. I want to think about dance as a tool for your craft, as healing magic, as ritual, as a place where each of us can meet that surging electricity, the divine feminine or the masculine, our ancestors, the living emergent presence of the life principle that spurts and twerks through our muscles. I want to think about dance as an opportunity to move our minds in sync with our bodies and our shadows and each other. My very gay, very wise friend Jonathan moved to Montreal from Edmonton. He took a class on voguing and realized that somehow unconsciously in his life he'd been educated to hold his wrists straight, to still the swish in his hips, to pass straight. And that unlearning those constraints unleashed in him a power. On the flip side, I have repeatedly in my life, and even getting dressed for today, struggled to figure out what feminine is so I can perform it correctly. Funnily enough, it was in a pole dance studio that I felt most connected to a feminine power that had previously confused me. I got really into pole dancing for a couple months, you guys. Spinning upside down, holding a pole with my thighs in a bathing suit while a teacher yelled, "Pussies to a pole, baby!"
Pussies to the pole!
Was deeply fulfilling. In general, though, feminine mostly eludes me and stays beside me. Stereotypes of gender, whether applied to Homo sapiens or divine essences, seem mostly useful for constraining and preoccupying us. Maybe so we don't get down to the necessary work of knowing the weird and wonderful truths of our own bodies and our powers, and of using that knowledge and power to save the planet from greed. Because make no mistake, we are in a fight for our lives. Every tool we can grasp that gives us freedom and energy and hope is magic, divine. Can I get an amen? Actually, wait.
Yes, queen.
But I was thinking, maybe in recognition of our shared sorrow for the damage that we brought, for the destruction that we face, I could get a shared, "Aw, man."
Oh, man.
I want to talk about dance as ritual that unleashes power and heals the sick. I'll take the example of the Korean put, which literally translates to good. One example of the infinite variety of dance-based ritual from around the world. Performed predominantly by Mansin, which literally means 10,000 spirits. The Mansin are priestesses, women shamans, each dance with its own unique power to bring healing or prosperity to individuals, families, or communities. And I want to talk about Anna Halprin. She's considered one of the mothers of postmodern dance. She used dance to capture a serial killer, to diagnose and then recover from her own cancer, and launch movement in art therapy. And before I start my weird quick step through these loosely connected ideas, I want to entreat you, gentle listener, whether you are in this room at the Westmount United Church, or in the holy room that we create together between our ears, listening in the dark, to close your eyes, and in the silence to hear your breath. And beneath your breath, your heart. Place your hand on your heart, and listen to the bass line that is with you all the time. Please keep your eyes closed, and bring your awareness down to feel that internal rhythm in your pelvis, in between your hips, and sway. Just a little private, slow thing. Nobody's watching. Your own whore of Babylon, sex goddess, early Elvis moment. Do it in the room or do it in your mind's eye. The neurons that fire when you dance or when you remember dancing are almost exactly the same. almost as though spirit is dancing within us all the time. Imagine your hips are rocking side to side like a boat, safe in a quiet sea, beneath the vast dance of planets and stars. Imagine you are a tree in a summer wind. Imagine you are holding a sleeping child in your arms, and you are rocking, and you are beyond tired, but the movement comes of its own volition. This is the beginning of the dance of this episode. Rock your child, and by your child, I mean that unique spark of life that is in each of us to bring forth into the world, whatever form it may end up taking for you. Rock this spark of potential in your mind's eye. Let your strict spine and tense wrists go soft, and feel the milk, bone, blood of your strength. It is holding you long after you let go. The space in your pelvis is full of echoes of the mothers who have rocked us, and the mother self, who is one of ourselves, who rocks us even when we are alone. Bio mother, Gaia mother, if you like, who gives air every time we hope to take a breath. Hold her safely in your belly and your heart and in your lungs as we continue. From 1979 to 1981. From 1979 to 1981, 6 women were raped and murdered on Mount Tamalpais across the Golden Gate Bridge from San Francisco. The trails were closed and the community lived in helplessness and rage. At the time, Anna and Lawrence Halprin were leading a community workshop called A Search for Living Myths and Rituals. The participants decided to enact a positive myth in dance, the reclaiming of the mountain. That ritual, called In and on the Mountain, was performed over several days and included a walk along the very trails where the killings occurred. The Tamalpa dancers performed dance offerings in honor of the waters, the winds, earth, and fire. In the fire dance, they enacted the violence of the victim and the killer, reversing roles until everyone embodied. The evening's portion of the ritual ended with a plea for restoration and peace. After the dance, the audience and performers continued the ritual aspect of the evening by creating, in smaller groups, a passage to the next day's event. The main ingredients of this passage consisted of a feast, a dream meal, and a sunrise ceremony. The dream meal is a community ritual in which members of the group sleep together in a circle with their heads towards the center. The intention is to form a group vision, which is constructed collectively in the morning as members share their night's dreams. On the Mountain completed the ritual with the dancers and other participants challenging the killer directly by walking down the mountain, each alone. A few days later, police received an anonymous tip that ultimately led to the capture of the trailside killer. Don Jose Mensua, a Huichol shaman, then 109 years old, visited Anna Halprin and heard this story, and he said, "This mountain is one of the most sacred places. I believe in what your people did, but to be successful in purifying this mountain, you must return to it and dance for 5 years." And so the living myth grew. Inspired by the coincidental capture of the killer and mindful of the shaman's counsel, the dance continued for 5 years every spring, each time deepening participants' understanding and expanding their vision. In 1985, the dance was renamed Circle the Earth, where participants had once danced to reclaim a small measure of peace on the mountain. They now dance to restore health and peace to the planet. Circle the Earth, the planetary dance, continues today. The 39th annual planetary dance on Mount Tamalpais is coming up June 2nd, 2019. I've been assured the parking situation will be much remedied for previous years. As her biographer, Janice Ross, in Experience as Dance, puts it, Anna claims the capacity for a contemporary Western life to create its own rituals. Circle the Earth was informed by sacred ritual dances like the sun dance. From the description, a few years ago, Anna had the privilege of attending a Native American sun dance. The sun dance requires a deep commitment on the part of the participants. They must spend a year preparing to do it. 10 days before, they fast and take sweats. The performer begins the dance with prayers and blessings and then submits to having the leader take sharp bear claws and penetrate his chest. The bear claws are attached to thongs which stretch out like a maypole to a young green tree planted in the center of the dance space. They dance in rhythm around the pole until it is time to be released. Then they pull away with the weight of their bodies until the bear claws tear open their flesh. At this particular performance, one male dancer was unable to release the claws, and we saw his excruciating and painful struggle. Anna turned away. But next to her, an old woman sitting on the tile ground suddenly and fiercely snatched a twig and walloped Anna on the shins with such force that she doubled over. And Anna learned in that one split second that as a witness, her role was to support the performer. She was not there to be a judge, to be entertained, to see a spectacle. She was there to pray, to encourage, to make sure the performers achieved their task, and to be totally and irrevocably present. She was there to witness. Circle the Earth is a peace dance. Not a dance about peace. Not a dance for peace, but a peace dance. A dance in the spirit of peace. It is a dance that embodies our fears of death and destruction. A dance that becomes a bridge and then crosses over into the dynamic state of being called peace. Circle the Earth is a dance of peacemakers. A dance that makes peace with itself, makes peace between the performers, makes peace with the spirit, and ultimately makes peace with the earth on which it moves. In a world where war has become a national science, peacemaking must become a community and planetary art in the deepest sense of the word, an exemplification of our ability to cooperate in creation, an expression of our best collective aspirations, and a powerful act of magic. We'll circle back to Anna Halprin, but first more on the powerful magic of collective aspirations. Shamanism is Korea's oldest religion, predating the introduction of Buddhism and Confucianism. Some of the dances performed by the Maxim, or more collectively known as the Mudang, trace steps that are literally prehistoric. Since the 15th century, non-Confucian religions were suppressed, and in the 1890s, Protestant missionaries demonized Korean traditional religion and led campaigns of violent suppression. South Korean anti-superstition policies in the 1970s and 80s wiped out ancestral shrines. In North Korea, shamans and their families were targeted as members of the hostile class and were considered to have bad soul and tainted blood. But Korean shamanism is blossoming again today in South Korea, sometimes as a nationalist performance, sometimes in contemporary art practice, and sometimes as a longing for a spirituality that is nature and ancestor-focused. A personal connection to the spirit world. In North Korea, it's estimated that close to 16% of the population practices some form of traditional religion or shamanism. Contemporary Korean shaman Yoon Mi says, I often compare our practices to those of Native American people. We pray for the mountains. We pray for the sea and for the sky. When we perform a ritual dance, we communicate with the spirits of our ancestors who serve as a bridge between us and God. We find solutions to problems people face with the help of the spirit world. Young Koreans see us as a sort of therapist. South Korean artist Park Chan-kyung sees his country's traditional spiritual practices as a way to imagine a way beyond modernization. The speed of which he believes is in part responsible for creating a capitalist greed and lack of concern for others that leads to catastrophes like the Seawall ferry sinking in 2014, where 304 people drowned, mostly children. In his film Citizens Forest, Park stages a haunted procession of ghost-like figures in silver masks. He based the scene partially on the good, rite like a village festival with dancing, chanting, and sacrifices to the gods. Shamanism, he says, encourages not only community, but also feminism, as well as granting participants a sense of their place in the larger cosmos. When we go looking for the witches we've been missing, part of what motivates that for us is a need for a feminist history. That is, not just a history of women, but of stories that move in different ways and to different places because they follow not only women's and underrepresented people's biographies, but also their ideas and their spiritualities, their rituals, and their methods of forming a human community. Shaman Yunmi describes her experience being hit with the shaman sickness that would change the direction of her life. Prior to the ceremony, I only recall falling very ill to the brink of death. I was 26 when I first showed symptoms of what we call shamanic illness, or shamanic crisis. I first started to experience facial paralysis. Every night was filled with terrifying visions and even visits from the spirits. I tried both traditional Korean and Western medicine, but doctors failed to diagnose my illness. After 4 months of visiting doctors for their consultations, my mother took me to a local Mudang house. At the time, I thought only psychologically weak people visited the Mudang. With just one glance at me, the Mudang said, "You need to accept your calling, or else you're going to die. You need to accept your calling, or else you're going to die." If by chance you listen to our episode on Mama Lola and the Ifa voodoo tradition, this idea of spirit sickness will sound familiar. When Orishas made contact, attention must be paid. Which is not to say that modern medicine isn't spectacular because it is. We are witches who love science. Sometimes the sickness, though, has its roots in the soul or in the spirit. Sometimes sickness is a call to change our lives. Maybe a magnetic pull from a polarity we've been missing in a world crushed under patriarchy is so much more classic. A call to healing, or to seeking, or to creating, or to being in our bodies in the natural world again. As Gus Beth, former dean of the Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies and advisor to 2 presidents, famously wrote, "I used to think the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science we could address those problems. I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation. And scientists don't know how to do that." You snapped right when you sent me.
It's a great quote. That's why I sent it to you.
One way to do that might be to dance. I don't know. It might be. Maybe alone, maybe together. As Cynthia Winton Henry points out in Dance, the Sacred Art, religious anxiety about the body seems to perfectly sync up with the timing of the onset of industrialization and colonization. Wanting to believe that commercial prosperity would bring happiness and alleviate suffering, a lot of people became caught in the industrial machine. And as they did, their folk songs, stories, and dances diminished like endangered species. Decade after decade, as the new industrialized, civilized, progressive values spread to other continents, they began to devastate many of the world's dancing cultures. Indigenous leaders like the Northern Plains shaman Wovoka, who directed and created the sun dance, saw the effects of this and warned his people. All Indians must dance, everywhere. Keep on dancing. Pretty soon, in next spring, Great Spirit come. Indians who don't dance will grow little, just about a foot high in the state runway. Losing sight of the goodness of the body and dancing called the likes of Jewish theologian Martin Buber to state the obvious, Mary's did. The soul is not really united unless all the bodily energies, all the limbs of the body are united. Colonization, religious conversion, and the monotone capital swallowed dancers and dancers, and treated witches and shamans alike. In the Mudang, Gender Discourses on Shamanism in Colonial Korea, a PhD thesis by Rose Wang, she writes, "The first reports on shamanism in Europe coincided with the rising tide of European fear of witchcraft. Christian Russian settlers in Siberia chose this expression, shaman, and eventually began to apply it to all native spiritual healers. Western civilization defined itself against shamanism, creating an adversarial relationship between the developed world and indigenous people, between science and magic, between established and charismatic religion, and between institutional and alternative medicine. A word gets picked up and used to define, constrain, contain, demonize, convert, and colonize. In some places that word was witch, and in others it was shaman. At the same time, as part of the parallel process, an equal and opposite reaction, definitions are disrupted, and shamans and witches whirl away, smashing, reinventing, and reclaiming words as their own in the fertile, divinely feminist process of decolonization. Anna Halprin says, seeing her grandfather dancing, twirling in the ecstasy of movement in his temple, lit the fire of movement within her. She couldn't speak the same language as him, but she understood something fundamental about how they were connected when she saw the ecstasy of his body in prayer. She's been explicit in her work and writing about her goal of creating contemporary urban rituals. Rituals that are part of the great work of healing our communities and our earth and ourselves. Her biographer wrote, through dance, Anna has offered the possibility of reconstituting the world. In her book, Returning to Health with Dance, Movement, and Imagery, Halprin describes the dance which reconstituted her own world and her own body. I had wanted people to draw their own images, she writes, reflect upon them, and begin to learn the language of these images in their own bodies. This process of connecting our internal imagery involved dancing images that welled up from the unconscious as another way to connect the mind and body. Over time, it became clear that I was receiving messages from an intelligence within the body, deeper and more unpredictable than anything I can understand with my rational thought. While I was exploring this process, I drew an image of myself that I was unable to dance. This was a signal to me. Why couldn't I dance it? I had drawn a round ball in my pelvic area. I intellectualized it, but then later that night when my mind was quiet, I had intimations that the image had something to tell me and that I was in the mind. The next day I made an appointment with my doctor. I asked him to examine me precisely where I had drawn the round ball, and he diagnosed rectal cancer. I went through the traditional operation procedures and radical ones at that, which left me with a colosseum of feelings of real uncertainty about my future. Would I ever dance again? My doctor assured me that if I did have a recurrence within 5 years, I would be out of the woods. 3 years after my operation, I had a recurrence. And I knew then I would have to make some drastic changes in my life. Let me describe an example of how I was able to learn something about my life story, the mystery of my own personal imagery and my connection to the natural world by dancing my self-portrait. When I first drew myself, I made myself look perfect. I was young and brightly colored. My hair was blowing in the wind. I was the picture of health and vitality. When I looked at the picture after drawing it, I knew I couldn't even begin to dance it. It just didn't feel like it. I turned the paper over and furiously began to draw another image of myself. It was black and angular and angry and violent. I knew this backside image of me was the dance I had to do. When I did it, I was overwhelmed at the rage and anger inside of me. I kept stabbing at myself and making howling noises like a wounded animal. Some say I spoke in tongues. I had to have witnesses because I knew that unless I did, I would never be able to go through this ordeal. My witnesses were my family and my colleagues and my students, and they kept me honest, urging me to go deeper, reinforcing my sounds, calling out parts of the picture I was to dance. I danced until I was spent, and I collapsed, and I began to sob with a sense of great relief. Now, I was ready to turn the picture over and dance the healing image of myself. As I danced this image, I imagined my breath was water, and my movements flowed through my body just as water would flow. I imagined the water was cleansing me. I had an image of water cascading over the mountains near my home, and then the water flowed through me out to the endless vastness of the sea, taking with it my illness. I believed I was experiencing the forces of nature as they are imprinted onto my body. Something happened in that dance that I can't explain. I felt I had been on a mysterious journey to an ancient place. I am so captivated by the discoveries that happen in the visualization process and in this roadmap for the healing journey that I often forget to tell my friends and readers that after this dance, my cancer went into spontaneous remission. It has always seemed more important to me that I had found a way to live my life while coping with illness than what the actual outcome is. In a certain sense, it is the healing aspects that interest me more than the cure, because healing is a whole process available to all of us, all the time. A cure is an event, and it is neither predictable nor always available. In my personal journey from the self to the many, I have learned that we are all connected to each other and to the natural world in which we live. The power of dance to heal reaches its fullest potential when we are able to tap into this sense of wholeness and to feel this connection to all that is around us. I think whether we are seeking to heal ourselves or to heal the sickness of greed and poison in the world, or both, because maybe they're one, we need to tap into the sense of wholeness. Dr. Mike Samuels, director of the Art as a Healing Force Center in California, writes, "Art and ritual are the doorways into the realm of the heart, the tool for the transformation we now seek. They are what opens and what changes. When a person dances or imagines dancing, the area of the cerebrum that holds images of muscle movement is stimulated and sends messages to the hypothalamus. If the dance image is one of deep joy or release, the body is put into a healing state through the hypothalamic pathways. The body conveys every cell in the body with hormonal flood as the imagery lights up the neural nets in the brain." Throughout recorded history, artists have believed that their images have power in themselves. The shaman was the first artist that healed. The shaman traveled inward, glimpsed the spirits, acted, brought back the healing, and made art. He or she told the tale, crafted the masks, danced the song, and brought the inner world outward through ritual. Shamanic ritual is believed to actually have the power to change the physical world. Art and ritual as a healing force is being born as we speak. This art is meant to change reality. It has the power to transform. We are on the doorstep of a great journey. Anna Halprin's work is one of the first steps. Imagine where we will go from here. Imagine the dance floors of the world, and the kitchen dances you do when cooking alone, and the dance I hope you'll make of your own self-portraits, and of your drawings of the world as it is and could be when you all go home, when no one is watching, or when your cabinet is there to witness and uphold you. Imagine all of these and more are part of how we will witness and imagine the path to healing. Imagine the dance of celebration we will do when we are free.
End of part 1. Listen to part 2 now. If you have questions or comments, hit us up on social media at Missing Witches or at missingwitches@gmail.com.